I want to begin by acknowledging that I am sitting on the unceded traditional lands of the Musqueam people. And I gather from Elder Larry Grant that this is very close to the place where Capilano went down and encountered the first people from away and the first people who were coming from away to explore and eventually seized this land. So I try to be mindful of that as I go about my daily work. So today we're going to have the great opportunity to speak with Cris Derksen. Cris is a UBC music grad, internationally respected Indigenous cellist and composer who received a Juno nomination for her album Orchestral Powwow. She, I think, has been very busy during these pandemic times with a commission from the Calgary Philharmonic and a concert on our upcoming Wednesday noon hour series. So welcome here, Cris.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am sad that I can't be with you in Vancouver on the lovely unceded territory. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, it sure is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you been managing during all this lockdown? I see you active on social media and doing lots of concerts, but tell us what life is like.
Yeah, I haven't been home since I graduated from UBC, really. So for 13 years, I've really been on the road, and it's been kind of a lovely treat to be at home for 9 months. Surprising treat. I am so busy, even busier than I imagined. I've got a lot of commissions. So I'm doing performances, but also there's a lot of commissions coming in that are also like all over the place, like how my music is kind of all over the place. So I've done some classical commissions, a choral commission that are a bit shorter. And then I just finished Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto, which is like going to be an online editorial. So it's like 40 minutes of straight art, dance, fashion, film, like all combined. And I was the lead composer for that. And then I'm going straight into a 4-part docu-series that is due at the end of January. It's put out by the Knowledge Network, and it's really cool. It's called BC History, and it really covers a little bit of what you were talking about first contact and how even BC got its name. How it talks about a lot about how the government and how the white settler government created legislations and created laws to make it easier for white people to get ahead, and definitely made it really hard for any folks of color to maintain any sort of livable situation. So that's what I'm diving deep into, as well as these concerts that I do at night.
At night, in your spare time.
Exactly.
Well, I think, and that's interesting because you really do balance the performing and the creative side of things, which keeps you, I'm sure, very flexible in the various kinds of projects you can think on. But you came through UBC Music. You were a regular, I'm assuming, performance kind of major.
Yeah.
So, and from that, you've developed this really varied career. Can you give us an idea of how that evolved? Like, what did you do when you first started out, and then how has it changed?
I think I came into UBC as a string player with a little bit of a different perception at the beginning. I knew that I didn't want to play in a desk, like sit on a desk at an orchestra. I knew that really wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be like a really, really good player so I could play my own music. So I always went in with the idea that I was there to learn the skills, to practice, and to maintain the work life that is so rigorous at UBC into the actual life. But I also had the focus of I wanted to do it my own way. So I was super fortunate that I was already touring with Tanya Tagaq before I graduated, even in 2007. So I did my grad recital, and the next day I went to perform at the Glenn Gould Studios in Toronto. And the day after that, we went to Spain to perform for Womax. It was just like, the path was already set out. And again, it goes back to like me wanting to do something different and already creating that path while I was at UBC. Even like I was already, working with the pedals. I was already like performing quite a lot, already doing the festival circuit, the folk fest circuit while I was at UBC. So um, I really am so fortunate that I had a clear vision of what I wanted to do.
Oh, neat.
And the other things that really helped were I took a like Dr. Sal Ferreris. He came and he did a business and music course that was super helpful. And I also took a business and music course through BC Arts Alliance.
Okay.
Like I just took a lot of business courses that related to the arts to also, you know, direct me on my way and help me get grants and help me
Right.
like
Right. Well, that's,
learn.
and so that's what I was wondering. So what were, like, so you've got your performance skills down at UBC, but obviously when you're out there in the kind of diverse world of performance and creation and film and all these different things that you do, there are other skills. So what kind of skills would you recommend students think about if they're going to go, as they go out into the professional world?
I think trying to be as diverse as possible, like if you're a composer working with as many mediums as you can, animation, like dance, theater, even in the visual arts world, there's a lot of room for music. The music is like related to so many things, movement and dance and music. It's like all one. Um, so really it is about getting your name out there and doing as many different projects as you can get your little hands on. But speaking about projects, I also would really recommend creating your own projects, creating your own work, going for those grants that allow you to develop what you want to do. One, they give you an income to live off of, but two, it helps you see where you want to be in the future.
So,
And
so
even the
did you
process
did you
of
start
writing the
right away
grant,
with the grants, or how did that
definitely.
play into your life?
Well, I don't know if I started right away. I think I got my first grant like 3 years after graduating. I definitely applied for grants before, but I know that Canada Council right now has a huge mandate on new and emerging artists and first time applicants. So it's a really excellent time to be applying for grants. And I sit on these grants boards and I see kids coming straight out of university starting their own collectives, like new music collectives, and they're being quite successful. So I'm all for it.
Well, I think, as a matter of fact, maybe the last time you and I saw each other, we were sitting on one of those panels together. And I think that's the thing. If you're good enough at getting grants, they usually give you some work looking at other people's grants.
Yeah, and that's also a really excellent place to learn how to write the grant.
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
because that really becomes a part of the independent artists. I know on social media, as we get to grant deadlines, people start saying, I'm now not going to be posting because I have to write up all these grants. And it just
yeah,
becomes part of our work life, learning to articulate what we want to do in such a way that it's clear what we need the money for.
exactly. And you have to make it clear for the jury and for those who are reading it, but at the same time, you're making it clear for yourself. Like you're making your own project clear in what you want to do, where you want to go, and I actually usually start with the budget. That's where I start. Is I'm like, how much do I need to go? What do I need to do? What do I want to do? What are my dreams? Dream big, aim high, not too high.
Yeah.
Be realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's incredible advice. So you as an artist, now when you apply for grants, I'm trying to figure out how to identify your positionality, right?
Right.
Because you come from a classical tradition, but you have Indigenous heritage. You've worked with pop groups and filmic stuff and all. So how do you articulate that positionality?
Yeah, I do. My perception is quite unique, and I think that's actually quite a benefit. So I'm Indigenous, I'm half Cree, half Mennonite. Um, I come from this classical background. I work with electronic tools. I'm really into creating music that is accessible and relatable. I'm really into bringing classical music into a space that again, is accessible and is relatable and is something that folks who don't usually go into classical spaces can feel comfortable with. I also think that with because I'm kind of pan genre, I fit into all of these different boxes. Like I fit into world music because I have like indigenous influence in my music, but I also work with I always work with a dancer and an indigenous dancer. So I go to the world music events and I get the world music gigs. I also get the art festival gigs like Luminato and Push that are a little bit more looking out the box and all encompassing. Even when I go international, they're usually festivals like Push. Like I've done the Darwin Festival in Australia, as well as the Sydney Fest in Australia. And those are very similar, like they're multi-disciplinary festivals. I fit into the classical world, not to the same degree as like straight up working with the symphony, but I actually am getting all those gigs right now with like the Calgary Philharmonic. It allows me to have such a broad audience base, which is so amazing. It helps when, yes, it helps build like my fan base, but it helps also just me being able to play everywhere and not oversaturating a market really. Like I can play in Regina with the Regina Symphony, but I can also play in Regina with the Folk Fest, and those markets don't really cross over. And so I'm totally like welcome at both of those, you know? So being so far out of the box, it kind of puts me in all of the boxes, I guess.
Right, right. Oh, so you really, do you find you interact with those audiences differently on social media and have to post differently to speak to them, or do you just do Cris?
I just do Cris. Like my social media is not really like that performative. Um, I have Facebook friends only. I don't have a Facebook fan page. And I took that down because of basically like Factor and other granting bodies were starting to go in this direction that they really wanted to see how many fans you had. But at the time you could buy fans. And I was like, this is doesn't make any sense for me. And I'm here for the music. Like I'm not here for the fans. I'm here to actually create music all for my life. That's what I want to do with my life. And the fan part is like not my goal. Like being
Yeah, yeah,
famous is not my goal. My goal is to like have a long and respected career.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I took down the Facebook fan page and I only have friends. And then for Instagram, you can totally follow me on Instagram, but you're mostly going to see my guinea pigs and my dog. Like maybe you'll see like a screenshot of like the guinea pig and me composing, but like it's pretty chill. I'm pretty chill on like advertising. I have a website and I have an agency and they're way better at promoting me.
Interesting. So how do you are how do you express that to Factor when you go to Factor? Like what?
Um, well, I don't go to Factor.
Okay, okay,
Like I feel like I do think they're a great resource. I've looked at, coming back and going to Factor, but honestly, because I'm Indigenous, I know there's Indigenous money, and I feel like I am going to take that Indigenous money because that's where where I fit, one where I feel like I've been told too, if it's not going to be used, they're going to like diminish the amount of funds coming out of Canada Council. And right now, for Indigenous, the Indigenous program, there's a lot of money going into it. So I'm definitely going there and getting like all of my needs met.
yeah, because I mean that is one of the things that I have had some Factor grants, and it is a real challenge to try and figure out how to even position a classical artist in the concept of how many followers and Instagram things and all that kind of stuff that they expect, because they're still they're trying to understand us, but they're really designed
Yeah.
for more commercial activities.
They're definitely more designed for commercial activities. And I think the starting grants for Factor are pretty low, like $2,000 or $3,000.
Yeah,
I like, BC, go to BC Arts Council. they have more money.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
like,
that's great advice. Yeah. Now, how
um,
about like I know you and I have spoken in the past a little bit about your experience at UBC Music. How how do you feel about university music programs and what we might want to think about in terms of our future to try and allow more diverse students to kind of see themselves here and find pathways to their musical goals?
it's such a interesting and tricky conversation that, and I've been having this conversation with a lot of my Indigenous peers about how to make university more accessible for Indigenous folks. It's really, especially within the classical program, because you do need to be at a certain level of performance to get into the program, to understand, to keep up with everyone around. So it's a really tricky thing because that education comes at a younger age, and folks on the res definitely don't get that education, don't get musical education, and all of our governments across the country are constantly taking arts funding out. So it's becoming, I feel, I don't know the answer to that one, because that one's like more of a governmental, like lobbying kind of answer, which I don't have the time to do. Um, but one thing I think like all universities can do is like, I took, one course I took that was really cool at UBC. It was with Dr. Bob and Marin Cadell, and it was a multidisciplinary class that had a bunch of profs from the different fields, and that was super cool. Oh, Giorgio was in it, Giorgio Massanis. Um, so I think like having more courses that allow for like cross arts like contamination, like allow for folks to meet other people in other disciplines, um, is would be super helpful. Again, the business would be really helpful, um, and like as far as getting more Indigenous kids or like BIPOC Black Indigenous kids into university, I don't know how to make that more accessible, because it's that one problem of like we need to get to a certain level to get in. The one thing though I did that was super cheeky at UBC is I took a master's level pop theory course, and in it we were discussing all of these different classical Western art theories, and then trying to bring in pop music into it. And my first paper for that was like, we've got to change the language of this theory, because this theory doesn't actually, it's like putting like the square box in the round hole. These things don't actually like connect. Like we need to talk about like black theory. We need to talk about like black, if we're going to talk about like pop music, we need to talk about like the what is black theory in music, like breaking that down. And so I wrote a paper saying that we need to change the language. And then I got to perform with Kanye West that year. And so to like to make my point clear, I didn't write my final paper. I just gave the manila envelope with my invoice for Kanye West, and I was like, this is pop music. This is pop theory. I didn't pass, but it was definitely like my cheekiest move, and something that I still believe. Like we need to change the language of music theory.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely what I've seen at the music theory conferences and the musicology conferences in the last year and a half, 2 years. There are a lot of people saying that, and a lot of people standing up and saying we've got a problem. But I mean, finding the pathway is the challenge. Like, so what do you do then? How do you allow space for these other musics in what has been quite a strict program?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I feel like things are coming through. I know that there's a lot more papers written that include my stuff and include like Andrew Buffer, Ian Cousin.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Ian was here last year. He gave a great presentation.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree completely. So that you mentioned those two folks, who are also key members in that group of Indigenous artists that met in Banff in, I think it was 2019. And it
Yeah.
was Call to Witness the Future of Indigenous Classical Music. So can you
Yeah.
give us an idea a little bit about how that developed and where that movement is going and what its impact is on the Canadian music scene?
Yeah, totally. It started with Renalta, who is the head of the Banff Center's Indigenous program, coming to me and asking me what I wanted to run, and I was like, where the hole is, where we have a big gap, because within Indigenous music, it's a full community, right? There's like, but that's more for the pop scene and for like the folk country kind of crew. And I was like, I know we have like almost 2 dozen Indigenous folks that are working in the classical world, but we're all like working kind of alone. We haven't come together. We know who each other are, but we don't actually know each other are. So I was like, let's do. I want to make a conference where we come together, where we one build our relationship together as folks working within the same field, and two, let's get a document together to talk about appropriation, to talk about in classical music, because that is still one of the big things, for classical music. Again, going back to sitting on grants, there's still grants written that don't include Indigenous composers for an Indigenous project for a symphony. And so we got to take that back. We got to take these, and it's about also, these are our stories to tell. If we're going to talk about Indigenous stories, they need to be told by Indigenous people. So like looking at, I'm going to name names here. So looking at the Coming Home Star, the ballet, and how that did not include Indigenous people at the very top, at the lead. They didn't have an Indigenous choreographer. They didn't have an Indigenous composer. They brought in Tanya, but that's like one throat singer who's coming on top of the work that's being written and the direction that's being written by non-Indigenous people. So it's, yeah, we talk about that. And we talk about how, like, when we came together, it was really beautiful. We came together for like 10 days and we hashed out all of our problems with the university, and many tears were shed. And we talked about like where we want to shine the light for the future, um, and how to create. And it's about creating relationships and friendships, and it's creating those with the institutions, creating those with the symphonies, with the arts administrators, with with performers. So I just sent you, right before we talked, the actual document.
Oh,
If
nice.
you even want to send that out, you can send that out.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's I was pretty struck by that as it was happening. And I think almost all the artists who were there have really become more evident in the world of Canadian music since that time. Like, I think it was a
Yeah.
great way to shine the light on this important initiative, because I had worked when I was at the Winnipeg Symphony with a number of Indigenous musicians. It was always challenging because it isn't necessarily an easy fit, because the way symphonies operate is very rigorous. It's time oriented. It's, you have this role, you get paid this much. You have this role, you get paid. It's
Yeah.
very, very bureaucratic. And I think the creative space that we need to work together needs to be more flexible.
Definitely, Indigenous time is a different process. Um, Definitely for more flexible, but also I think like, I probably know some of those projects, and you're also then putting like folk music and classical together, and that's also a different like hierarchy
Yeah,
too. Um,
yeah,
and
no,
there's a difference between a guest soloist and a guest composer.
yeah, yeah. No, that's for sure. So your Juno nominated album in 2015, 2016 was called Orchestral Powwow. give us an idea of what kind of musical space you were constructing there.
Yeah, again, this goes back to the grants. So sitting on so many grants and reading about so many Indigenous projects without an Indigenous lead brought me to this. It was also bringing back, like, coming back to both of my traditions, I was saying. So coming back to my classical roots and really, really, really bringing up my Indigenous roots. So orchestral powwow is exactly as it sounds. It's powwow music with symphonic written around it. I use the same library as A Tribe Called Red did for powwow music and composed symphonic works fully around them. So I kept the powwow pieces full and as they are and composed around it. And then that led to a full 45-minute show that still continues to run, surprisingly. And it stemmed from me wanting to be like, no, actually let us tell our own stories. Let Indigenous people do classical music, like give us the reins. We're ready. And also I have this like conceptual little thing behind it is usually there's not a conductor because I feel like usually a conductor is an old white man. And I feel like in Canada I think we don't necessarily need to listen to the old white men any longer. So the European players have to follow the beat of the Indigenous drum. So it's kind of like a metaphor of how I feel like we need to listen to the beat of the Indigenous heart in Canada.
Huh. So, and you thought that's a great concept, and I think probably something that the musicians would enjoy doing. But you know, the traditional orchestral thing would be for you to take over the role as the conductor. I mean, how did you decide to do it the other way?
Um, because I wanted to play the solos that I wrote for
Yeah.
myself. So, and like for sure, I'm still doing definitely like music leadership. Like I definitely am like bringing folks in and looking at the key players when it's their time to come in. But they also have to follow the beat, like strictly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a
Well,
bit confusing. Like powwow music is basically in 4/4, but the confusing part is I always give like one beat and then they start. So I've it's like explaining that to the orchestra, like don't listen to the beat one. That's not the beat. Like the beat one is like when they start, and there's like a break in that, and yeah.
well, and I think that's always the challenge when you're negotiating those different traditions. I did a
Hmm.
project once with a Pakistani harmonium singer, and he brought his tabla player only to the last rehearsal with the orchestra, and it turned out that their beat one was not where I thought their beat one was. So we had
Oh
to
man,
spend 10 minutes in the rehearsal trying to figure out, okay, how do we line up between that and that? But that was an enjoyable part of it. But the
yeah,
management of the orchestra were going crazy because it was 10 minutes they didn't think they had.
yeah. I understand that. I worked with Kieran Alawalia for a big Christmas show in Toronto where they light the big Christmas tree at Nathan Phillips Square, and she sent me, and I was doing the arrangement, and she sent me the stuff, and I thought I arranged it, but she had a full different version that she was doing, and it took every ounce of rehearsal for all of us to figure it out. I
But
totally.
I think that's the place that we're in now, that when we want to open ourselves up to collaborating with people, we need to budget more time. And I think that's,
Definitely.
the arts councils need to think about this, our, you know, professional associations need to think about it. It's the same with what we've been finding. One of the most challenging things is synchronization rights, like trying
Mm.
to figure out who owns the right, how much you need to pay, how long do you want to keep it out? Like this is a completely new thing for us. We're all used to just paying our SOCAN fees and it's cool, man,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
but all of a sudden we're in this really different world. So how do you think life is going to change over the next 2 to 5 years as we aren't sure how big our audiences can be? We're not sure we can travel. Like how
Yeah.
are musicians gonna monetize their incredible skill?
I feel like more like collaboration projects. Again, going back to like working with filmmakers and like instead of just playing the piece with your iPhone, which is what I'm gonna do for you folks, but like uh, working with filmmakers and then you make a story, and then and it's a great time to go for grants. Just go and get them all right now. I think it's a great time for creation. Um, yeah, and also I feel like when there's parameters around anything and the challenge of like we've got to make something that fits into this thing, you can come up with such creative ideas. So I think there's some really good creative ideas that are going to come out of this. I'm doing a piece with the Zara Choir in Halifax, and they're not a female choir. Um, and I gave them some works that they're going to go because we didn't want to do just the little square boxes singing my piece, so we gave them an improvisation section where I give like a long cello loop, so it's like the same phrase over and over, and they're going to go into the woods by themselves and film themselves singing. And then I'm going to take all of that material back with the sounds of like them walking and singing and then create the piece. And I feel like that's a really beautiful way to collaborate when we're not together, but also to be in nature and to like respect that. And yeah, it's
Wow.
like putting on that creative brain and being like, how can we still make this very relatable? And how can we still make this feel like community?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. What's your sense of the relative roles of live performance versus recorded performance as we go forward? Because I know at the beginning people were, oh, I don't want to see something online. I'll just wait till they can go live again. And then they found out, well, we aren't going to go live for a long time. So now we got to do this. And it's changed how we think about, how we position ourselves at our instruments and lighting and all this kind of stuff. But as
Mhm.
we go into a time when it's more possible to do things live, but there's still something there that people you can get to that you wouldn't otherwise get there. Like, how are you going to conceive your projects so that they work?
Um, I f- well, I feel like the live thing is not ever going to go away because people crave that in-person experience, and it's not the same on the computer. And as a performer, we're like performing into the nothing is how I say it. Like we're the energy exchange is not there, and I think like as soon as I can fly, or as soon as I feel like it's safe to fly, I'm totally gonna do it. I think though there's gonna be like advancements in like again like always having the live stream is going to be so awesome for folks that don't have the accessibility to like come to things. It's allowing for arts to become a lot more accessible. The other thing I really like about us all being kerfuffled in this new world is that we're all in the same boat. So it doesn't matter how many performances I've done around the world. I'm in the same boat as like like for you first years. Like we're all learning this together. So I feel like there's advantages for up and coming musicians to like really take the reins and be really creative with what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think it is the time when the creativity that our colleagues are, whatever age they're at, I think this is the time for that to come out and for people to really take the opportunity to try things. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you're pushing the creative button because I think that's an important one as we go forward. Anyway,
Mhm.
I'm hoping that as it gets safer to fly and as time goes on, we'll be able to have you here back at UBC Music
Yeah,
in person.
totally.
And
I was very sad to make that choice.
I want to say thank you so much for talking to us and giving us a little idea of how your life is unfolding and for seeing the guinea pigs back there.
Totally.
So thanks a lot, and we will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Take
See you
care.
later, Pat.
Yep.